Hi YouTube, this is Raven. I'm a survivor of a 16-year marriage to a covert narcissist or someone with a personality disorder. I'm not sure whether he had NPD or BPD, borderline personality disorder, because he's not been officially diagnosed by a healthcare provider with NPD or BPD. This is just simply my opinion based on a 16-plus year marriage and my observations of his behavior. That being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about dysfunction and living in dysfunction and chaos. Because if you've been in a relationship with, a narcissist or a toxic person, you get used to the state of living in dysfunction. And what I mean by that is that my entire marriage, I felt like I was the glue that held the marriage together. I was the person who had to remember everything, that we were always on the brink of disaster if I didn't remember something. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee this morning. I'm trying to wake up. But what I mean by that is that narcissists create dependence. They want you to be dependent on them. But at the same time that they create this dependence, they also put you in this role, or at least mine put me in this role of being, the glue that holds everything together. Like he was a grown man, but he didn't act like a grown man. He acted more like a child and putting me in a mother type role where, I had to pay all the bills. I had to be the one to, remember, okay, the children have to be picked up at this time. We've got to pay this bill at this time or they're going to take our car. We have to pay this bill at this time or they're going to take our house. I was basically Siri. I was like Siri of the relationship. Remember, Tuesday, 9 o'clock, doctor's appointment. Dee-dee. But I always felt like I was the little Dutch boy, that's like puts his finger in the dike to hold back disaster, to keep the dike from bursting and it's gonna, destroy the town or whatever. Because I was always the one having to remember this kind of stuff. And, like we would go out to dinner. And if I didn't remind him, oh, get your wallet before we go, then, he would get upset, like, stop reminding me that I need my wallet. I'm an adult. I know that I need my wallet. But then that one time where he forgot his wallet and we get to the restaurant, he reaches to pull out his wallet. It's not there. Like, why didn't you remind me? Why didn't you remind me that I need my wallet? I'm like, well, because you told me you're an adult and you don't want me reminding you to bring your wallet. I was the glue, pretty much. But at the same time, he had me so freaked out all the time that disaster was around the corner. Like he was always telling me that I'm one step away from being fired. I'm one step away from being laid off. They're bringing in new guys and I'm the old guy there and they're making cutbacks at the company and, I could be fired and we'll lose our house and we'll be living on the street. I mean, it was always like that. Everything was a crisis. When he went to the mailbox, I didn't realize that he was holding it back from me that we had a tax court date because he had not paid taxes for 4 years. And so he would, every time the mail came, it was like a crisis. He would run and grab the mail before I could get it, and he would freak out, like he's having a panic attack over the mail because we were getting letters from the IRS. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that we were getting letters from the IRS. But, one of the things that was always a crisis was, anytime we had to travel somewhere. And there was one Christmas where we flew to Texas with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Now, people fly with toddlers all the time, and it's no big deal. I fly for the Army, I've flown dozens of times for the Army, and it's no big deal, But in his mind, he created a crisis because he was always creating crises. And he was freaking out because we had to check the children's car seats. Because once we got out to Texas, we were going to be using other people's cars and we needed car seats. So we were going to have to check them, like baggage, and then pick them up. And he was freaking out. He had this whole scenario in his mind of, what are we going to do when we get to the airport? I mean, who's going to go get the car and who's going to watch the kids and who's going to pick up the baggage and how are we going to do that at the same time? And, and so he gets it in my mind now where I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe this is a crisis. Maybe, whoa, wait a minute, what if someone kidnaps one of our children, while we're standing there waiting for the bags to come up? one of the children runs out, and gets hit by a car, at the, in the pickup line or whatever. It was a crisis that didn't need to happen. It did not need to be in my mind. But living in dysfunction, with a toxic person changes you. And it changes your how you think about things and your focus. And one of the things I noticed once I was away from him, the longer I was away from him, the more independent I became. And I became the person that I was before I married him. Before I married him, the person that I was would not have freaked out about flying with 2 toddlers somewhere. It would have been no big deal. It's like you plan, you have something's going to happen, you plan it, you execute that plan, and you go back and you say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, so next time we'll change things. But one thing I noticed, a few months after we were separated, I needed new tires for my van. And when I was married to him, new tires would have been a disaster. Oh my God, $700 for tires, $700. Where's the money going to come from? I can't believe they're going to charge us $700. Why have they not lasted that long? These tires are supposed to last 5 years. Why didn't they last 5 years? I mean, it would have been like that. And I'm just like, okay, I need new tires. I go to the tire store. What do you recommend? Okay, what's the warranty on these tires? What should I do to keep them up? Okay, all right, it's going to be like $700. All right, well, I need tires, so, put them on. It was no big deal. It was the same with the door on the van. As long as we had it, we have these automatic doors that they open. You push a button, they open up, they close. Well, they were always breaking. For some reason, they wouldn't work. And he had taken them to be repaired. And I think that he had taken them several times, found out how much it was going to be, and then would just say, oh, they couldn't find anything wrong with it. I got there, it wasn't malfunctioning. Well, it got to where both doors didn't work. And so I took it to the repair shop. It was no big deal. They're like, oh yeah, it's this part. We'll order it. They order the part, fix it, doors are fine. And it wasn't a crisis. It was just something. And my attitude towards spending money changed. Now, when I have to spend money on something, a large item, like tires or a tune-up for the car or fixing the door on the car, it's not a crisis to me. I'm like, okay, this is something that needs to be done. I have to have a car to drive. I have children, that have to have a car to get them from point A to point B. So in my mind, if I have to spend the money, yeah, I don't like spending a lot of money, but at the same time, it's not a crisis. I feel like, okay, this is something that needs to be done, and I feel good about it, that my car is not going to break down, on the way to pick the children up somewhere or on the way to clinicals for nursing school, because, I've done the adult thing and fixed the car. But in his mind, oh my God, it's the universe is coming after me again. The universe is trying to destroy me or whatever. But, he was like that, with spending money. If it wasn't money that he wanted to spend, because, he had no problem spending money out of our account, and keeping the balance in our account, close to zero or hovering above that. Like, for one example of this was he bought this very expensive printer. This printer was like $1,200. Very expensive, because he got in his mind that, I couldn't just be an artist. I needed to sell prints of my artwork. But he didn't want to pay somebody to make the prints. He wanted to make them himself. So he buys this $1,200 printer that we really couldn't afford to start with. And he starts trying to make prints on it. Well, and it never worked out, because it wasn't the kind of printer that's going to make prints that you can sell your artwork with. But it cost like a couple $100 to replace the ink every time you needed to replace the ink in this thing, because it had 6 different cartridges. And he found a guy who was going to replace them cheaply. He took your old ink cartridges and filled them with ink. Refilled them with ink, for half the money. Well, he did this, and it didn't work. It made the pictures look even worse. The ink ran. You can't get something for nothing, but narcs think that they can. Well, he got upset because the guy had let him try the ink, before buying it. And when it didn't work, the guy called him up and said, well, I want the ink cartridges back. Well, Narc is like, well, I've already used them. I've already used them. The guy's like, well, then you owe me $100. And Narc was freaking out like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? He says, I owe him $100. I'm like, well, pay him the $100 or give him the ink cartridges back. This is not a crisis. But in his mind, it was a crisis. And he's trying to pull me into his world of dysfunction so that I'll freak out too. And it was the same deal when we had the children's counselor, the first counselor that they had. She insisted that we go to parenting classes. Well, I went to like 2 parenting classes, and I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not going, because she was using the parenting classes to basically beat up on me, because she had decided that she had taken Narc's side, and she was telling me, what a horrible parent I was for going to nursing school, and instead of, quitting my job and quitting school and staying at home with the children full time. That's what I needed to do. And so I stopped going to these classes. Well, 6 months later, she sends an email that we owe her, both of us owe her $35 a piece, so $70 for the books, for the class. Well, she had told us that the class and the books were free. They were part of our counseling. So I told her, I'm not paying it. Especially how badly you treated me and the horrible advice you gave me. I should report you to some agency. Well, Narc was freaking out like, we have to pay her. What if we don't pay her? What is she going to do? I'm like, I don't care. It's like, I don't care. I'm not paying her. Well, he ended up paying her $35 because I guess he was freaking out. Like, what would she do? Well, she never did anything. After I told her that I should have reported her to some agency, for malpractice, she sent me an email back. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. And I'm like, and I know that that's Narc speak. Anytime someone says, I'm sorry you feel that way, or what I said, you misinterpreted what I said. It's like, no, I did not misinterpret what you said, lady. Telling me that I'm a bad mom, I should quit my job and collect alimony and child support. That is what you said. There was no misinterpretation on my part. But, once... It was also like finances. The finances were always a crisis. I talked about how, our bank account always hovered at zero because he was taking money out of it and putting it into a separate bank account. He owed thousands of dollars on a credit card I didn't even know about. But I thought that I was a horrible, I was a horrible budgeter, that I could not budget things because, we made over $100,000 together with both of our salaries, yet our bank account was always at zero or slightly above zero or below, because he was spending money left and right. And the thing is, once you get away from that toxic person, you realize that you can balance a budget. I could balance a budget. It's like, hey, there's money in my account. There's money for groceries. There's money to put gas in the car. But I beat myself up one time. We went to Oklahoma, the Army, and I'm at Oklahoma, and we're going to the barracks, and we lived in the barracks for the 2 weeks, and we ate in the DFAC, the dining facility. But there was one night that the unit wanted to go out to a restaurant, but the restaurant took cash. So I went to the ATM and take out some cash, to take out $40 for dinner, and it was insufficient funds. And I was like, oh my God, why is there insufficient funds? And I called up Narc. And he's like, well, there's insufficient funds because you rented a car while you were in Oklahoma to go visit your friend, which I had. I had rented a car the weekend before to go visit a friend who lives in Wichita, Kansas, and it was a couple hours away from where we were in Oklahoma. But at the time when I had taken the money out to rent a car, there had been plenty of money in the account. And so now there wasn't money. And so I'm sitting there thinking that, oh my God, I did this. I ran the account down, Well, no, he's the one off spending tons of money on anything and everything. But I took that burden on, that I was the one who was, spending us into the poorhouse. But when I finally got away from Narc, and I got away from all his crises and dysfunction, I was living here in this farmhouse. We had to move out to my grandmother's farmhouse. 30 days after all this went down, with him putting the gun in his mouth, trying to kill himself, being in the mental hospital, then saying all of a sudden he wants a divorce, I had 30 days, to think about this and to figure out what am I going to do with my life. And I had made a decision to move on with my life. I had went to the open house at the college and signed up to go to nursing school. And so I had made a decision in my mind, I'm going to move on with my life. But he would not let me move on. And he was trying to hoover me, but it wasn't the traditional hoover where, they're trying to pull you back into the relationship, romantically. He was trying to pull me back into the crisis mode. Because every time that I thought that, I was moving on and I'm happy now, I'm happy, I'm moving on, I'm making positive steps in my life, I would get a letter in the mail. And it would be a letter, not a letter like, okay, you need to show up at this date for us to go over finances for the divorce, you need to show up at this date. It would be notes like, your husband's now accusing you of being abusive. Your husband is now accusing you of abandoning the family home. Your husband is now accusing you of being a bad mother. Your husband is accusing your daughter of being suicidal, instead of him. All these things, that just crazy stuff that did not need to happen. And it was all crisis. He was trying to pull me back into his dysfunction. And I remember right when the divorce started, I told my sister-in-law, the one that married his brother, she's not even related to them. I told her, I'm getting off this crazy train. This is a crazy train and I'm getting off. And she said, you'll never be able to get off. You're stuck. And I said, oh, watch me. I'm getting out of this dysfunctional family. Because they were a dysfunctional family and I couldn't see it because I was in dysfunction and I was living in a state of crisis all the time. And that's what happens when you're with a narc, that you're in a state of crisis. And it's really hard to see it. It is only until you step out of the situation you can see just how much they have drug you down into that state. But you need to get out of it. So anyway, that's all for now. Be vigilant, be safe, take care.